In. Hey, we have no intro music, so we just dive right in. This is Sass Bites. This is your weekly bite of Sass during your lunch break. I'm your host, Micah Godbolt. Along with me today is Lise Holiday, co-hosting. Always awesome to have you in here from another connection, another room, and we'll see how this one goes, kind of connection. We are doing, this is week 2 of our series on front-end architecture. This last year was kind of the year of front-end architecture for both Elise and I know several others. And we realized there's a lot of people out there that might be new to them, that don't know what front-end architecture is, what an architect actually does, and what that role actually looks like. So what we've been wanting to do is get together some of the people within the industry that are either doing that role specifically or doing part of that role. And today we are honored to have as a special guest the creator of This Is Responsive, co-creator of Pattern Lab, you might have heard that before, as well also the co-creator of StyleGuides.io, an awesome website for resources, all the resources, style guides. So today I want to welcome Brad Frost. Brad Frost, thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks guys. Thanks for having me.
It's very killer to have you on here. You and I actually go back a bit. This was back, I think when This Is Responsive first came out. It was like a couple years ago, 2.5 years ago, something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
Somehow you let me get on a couple of code snippets onto there. I don't know what QA that got slipped past, but somehow you let me on there. So
it's better than my stuff.
So yeah, I got a couple things on there, couple contribs, and actually I think I still get like a ton of hits from that site. It's pretty hilarious. If you go to my code pen, there's like, you know, a couple hundred, like 70,000 or something like that, and I'm sure that's all organic SEO. Just kidding. So it's awesome to finally get it. Like, of all the conferences, we've never had a chance to actually bump into each other. So it's fun to have you on, get a chance to talk to you. I've definitely been following you since your RGA days, and it's really been neat to see everything you're doing with Pattern Lab and all those types of things. So we're going to dive into some interview and some viewer questions in a bit, but one thing I did want to jump into, we usually like to do a little sassy drama every week whenever something comes up. And to follow up from, it was actually 2 weeks ago when we last did the show, there is some drama going around about the extends versus includes war, you might say. Whether or not she actually should use extends, or you should just go ahead and just use mixins because they are so much more flexible and whatnot. Brad, where do you fall in that one? Do you have a certain side of the camp that you
I mean, to be perfectly honest, I don't really use a lot of that stuff. I sort of keep it to a minimum. I sort of learned early on that sort of diving too far into Sass just sort of abstracts things to a point where my output and my input are just totally different. I will do extends, like I'll do extend for a clear fix from time to time. Really, that's about it. Or, you know, input type submit, I'll extend a class of button or something like that. But really, sort of keep pretty light on that stuff. And what's the difference between an include? I guess that's
a great opportunity. No, the huge difference is that with the mixin, if you have a button mixin that has 5 properties, when you call the mixin, it takes all 5 of those properties and drops them into the CSS sheet every single time they use it. Whereas with an extend, those 5 properties stay up at the top of your style sheet. And when you extend it, it just takes a selector and appends the selector up top.
Oh, I see.
So it's a little bit cleaner. You save a little bit of CSS space, which the argument is kind of like, well, that's pretty much all gzipped away anyway. But probably the biggest problem with it, though, is like that process in Sass doesn't work in media queries because you can't extend a media query. You can't wrap a selector in a media query. It hurts brain. So there's a big debate as to, like, is it even worthwhile to use the extend concept? Tab, who's been he's spoken a lot of CSS, talked a lot about Sass as well in a lot of those conferences that I've seen him talk at.
He
is a
writes
big
CSS, yeah.
writes the CSS exactly. He's been a big fan of the extend concept for a while. I think it was actually Nicole Sullivan that like 6 years ago or something was the
Yeah.
first one that suggested this concept.
Yeah, I just saw a tweet from her about that. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
it's this morning. Yeah.
yeah. So this all that's why it's hot drama right now because it just came out. But the notion that we could actually get extends into the CSS language is pretty exciting because the problems that we had with abstraction of like, our selector is now way up the top of our style sheet instead of down here. Hopefully that'll be fixed. Extend inside of media queries, that should be fixed. There's actually examples Tab had in there of extending in media queries. So all that stuff should get working, and I really hope it happens because for me, like my entire typography is all in extends. So anytime I need to use like a whatever header, not H2, but whatever kind of header, I can just extend that chunk of style, and in the several different places that use it, they can all just extend that rather than having to include those styles in every single time. And it looks like we lost Elise, but I hope she will be back from a new room with new Wi-Fi. Oh, hey, and she's back. So that's good. For me, that's exciting. For someone who uses a lot of extends, if you go to one of my partials, it's basically selector extend, selector extend, selector extend, selector mix in, extend, so on and so forth. So
Wow.
for me, that's going to be neat to see that to see it actually get into the spec. It'll be an interesting transition period though. It's going to take some time for we're going to have both things happening for a while. We're going to have to spit out two different style sheets or have some kind of something to make that happen. So. Anyway, welcome back, Elise. Good to have you.
Hey, sorry about that.
So Brad, let's get into this. This is a conversation about you and about some of the things that you are doing. And specifically, you've got some new things on the horizon right now. I want to get a chance to talk about those because it's kind of exciting. You are diving into some new realms of publishing, I've heard.
Yeah. So there's a whole lot going on. Yeah, so, well, just today, Anna Debenham and I announced that we're going to do a podcast all about style guides and pattern libraries, and basically we'll be interviewing people who have successfully created and maintained these things and sort of hit it from all different aspects, how to sell it to your organization, how to implement it, how to create it in such a way that it's maintainable and part of your workflow. So we're super excited about that. We've already recorded a couple of episodes, and we're going to be recording some more and getting those out there on a weekly basis. So that's fun. In addition to that, yeah, I'm writing a book called Atomic Design. It's about sort of these concepts that I've been kicking around for the last year and a half, and I feel like it's pretty well baked and ready to go into book form. And yeah, so the fun thing about that is that I'm doing the whole thing out in the open. I really wasn't attracted to the concept of sort of going away into a hole and crawling into a cave or whatever, and then crawling out a year later saying, "Behold, I've come down from the mountain with this book chiseled onto stone tablets." And so I'm doing it all out in the open, writing it in the open, sharing my progress, sharing my workflow, sharing resources along the way, and sort of, I guess, 2 weeks into it now, pretty much, and it's already proven to be just really exciting. I'm really excited I made the call to do it this way. I've already gotten a bunch of people saying, let me check your grammar. I know a lot of people saying, I'd be happy to check your, whatever sort of tech stuff you end up including. Someone offered to translate it into Portuguese already. It's just It's been awesome. But in cooler still is, I've been sort of sharing bits. Well, you could read the whole thing online or whatever the current work in progress is. And just already, in the stuff that I've written, people have shared links with me saying, "Oh yeah, this really reminds me of this thing here," and just immediately bolsters the argument. Immediately, enhances the content with external links and other thoughts, and probably end up pulling in some block quotes. And it's awesome. It's really, really cool writing it this way.
Open source book writing.
Are you showing? Are you in your book? Are you kind of talking about like case studies, I guess, or like the way people are actually using this format, I guess, of organizing their stuff? I think that's the thing that I'm the most excited about for the Style Guide podcast, is actually hearing how other people are doing it. Because I think so many people, like our podcast, like Front End Architecture, so many people are thinking about this and talking about it. And the thing that I'm the most interested in is just seeing all the nuances, because every company, every project's different. So I was kind of curious if you were including that in the book as well.
Yeah. So chapter 4 is going to be all dedicated entirely to, how to make this work, sort of a soup to nuts, how to sell it through, how to, sell your stakeholders, sell your boss, sell your clients, what does it look like if you work within an organization versus in an agency environment or something. How to get visual designers on board with sort of more pattern-based thinking, UX designers, developers, back-end developers. How does all this work? And I think that probably what's going to end up happening is a lot of those conversations we're going to have on the podcast probably cherry-pick some of that stuff to sort of reinforce some of the stuff. A lot of it's coming from my own experience working this way for the past couple years. But yeah, really try to reinforce it with other people who work at much bigger places to sort of help reinforce that stuff. So yeah, I'm excited.
Awesome.
Very
Hey,
cool.
I actually want to dive into a little bit of that, because again, when we first met, you're working at RGA, and I'm kind of curious. What was your road to, like? One of the things we like to ask here is, like, when did you first realize that you'd moved beyond just doing development and you wanted to get to, like, moving to some of these more architectural things? Like, one of the pillars of architecture for us is the idea of a style guide, of being able to have this place where things are documented and things can go to. So when did that shift first happen? What were the catalysts there at RGA?
So I got hired on at RGA as a mobile web developer was my title, and this late 2009, early 2010. So I thankfully got into this whole mobile thing just a little bit before it became, necessary and just absolutely a huge priority for everybody else. So I consider myself to be extremely fortunate to be in the right place at the right time. So I spent, the first year or so taking my bumps and bruises, learning how to create for all of these, different devices, weeping over Android, 2.1 and stuff like that. And so after a while, though, as time went on, I sort of elevated up, not really by way of an official promotion, but just, somebody who, I was very much into and continue to be very much into it. Just, what's going on, what are the trends, how do we do things, and sort of, would share a lot and stuff. So eventually people started coming to me and saying, hey, we're working on this project, and can you give us a hand, or could you point us in the right direction? And that was sort of the beauty of how it was set up at RGA. My agency experience was a little bit different than a lot of people's experience, in that I wasn't really assigned to a specific client, or said, okay, you're going to work on this account and go away and only work on this forever. I sort of got to float because I was part of this sort of mobile special teams unit, whatever.
Like a team coming in to fix problems.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's sort of how I got into it, and so I got to have a unique perspective at this, sort of a bird's eye view at sort of what people were working on, what people were struggling with, and that's what led to This Is Responsive. That's what led to a lot of this thinking around, sort of what a successful redesign looks like and things like that. And we could talk about sort of monolithic redesigns and stuff, which is sort of what I'm writing about in the book now. But that's, sort of agency life's bread and butter. It's, hey, we need to get rid of our crappy 4 or 5 year old website, come in and replace it with the new shiny website, which in 4 or 5 years' time will become the old crappy, crusty website again. So that was all sort of interesting and very much sort of influenced a lot of my thinking as far as sort of systems and stuff go.
Nice. So then eventually you decide to strike out on your own, and how'd that all come about?
Yeah, so I remember going in to talk to my boss, and I said, "Hey, I have 12 speaking engagements over the next 4 months," and him just looking at me and saying, yeah."
That's not good.
And so eventually I sort of realized, I'm finding it hard to give somebody 40 hours of my time. And that was sort of, when I realized I should probably strike out on my own. And I'm really happy I did. And I'm really happy it was a really sort of organic, natural transition. It wasn't me leaving with my middle fingers up, saying, I quit and, I hate you and all of that. I quite literally left my job because I love it so much. People apparently wanted me to come in and talk to them about it. So that was sort of how that went down, which is great. And from an actual work standpoint, Josh Clark, actually, I was talking to him about a couple projects, and so I thankfully was able to sort of step out onto my own into these projects. So it was a very smooth and seamless transition, which is great.
So has it been mostly like consulting, or like I guess how did you get that clientele? Like, what's your secret sauce if someone's interested in kind of a similar route?
Yeah, people ask me this a lot. They say, I'm really not happy on my own. I want to strike out on my own. The biggest things I could say is to just, well, I have sort of a little mantra is that work hard, don't be an asshole, and share what you know. And that sharing what you know, writing blog posts, putting your stuff out there, sharing stuff, being involved in the community. It was, 3.5 years of me really getting to know the other people working with mobile web stuff and sort of building relationships with them, trying to put out resources, trying to write about my successes, failures, things I'm trying to unravel in my head. And it's just lather, rinse, repeat. There's no easy way around it, but I would say that that's a surefire way to at least, be on a better path if you want to sort of strike out on your own, or if you want a new job. I mean, whenever I was hiring people, the first thing I would do was go, yeah, of course, check out their portfolio, check out what projects they've done, but really I'm more interested in, do they have a blog? What are they saying on it? Do they sound like idiots? And very, very rarely like that isn't the case. But for people to be passionate enough to take the time out of their day to share the knowledge they have, even if you are just sort of like a junior level person or something, like you have unique experiences, you've had unique challenges and stuff, and people you'd be surprised, like who would be interested in that.
Yeah, that's the thing that I talk about a lot. When I was teaching and some of the talks I give, there's always somebody who knows something less than you know, and so I think this common response is, well, I don't even talk about because everything's already been written about this basic subject. But that's not necessarily true. You never know. Somebody's going to find your blog post or hear you talk about something basic or at some a local meetup. You may not get on like the conference circuit doing the basic stuff, but you are sharing your knowledge with other people, regardless of your skill level. I think that's super, super important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that what I've found is that people get crazy about this. Even stuff that I've written, and people say, "Oh, this person has already said it." It's like, so what? So what? And what you'll find is that what a lot of it sort of ends up it helps reinforce an argument. If multiple people are talking about it, and that's even with all this sort of style guide stuff, it's like, I'm not, with atomic design and all of that, it's like I put a name on it, and I feel like I sort of carved out something that was a little bit different, but like this notion of modularity has been around, it predates the web. I was just writing about it in the book. It's like Henry Ford assembly line days. This is not a new concept. So for someone to claim ownership over it or thinking that it's been said once, so therefore it doesn't need said again, is absolute rubbish.
Nice. So speaking of atomic design, oh sorry, Elise.
No, I was just gonna go into the next question too. Kind of.
It's a perfect segue. So yeah, speaking of atomic design and speaking of Pattern Lab, I'm kind of dying to hear this story, the origin story of Pattern Lab. Your connection with Dave Olson, someone I hadn't heard about before this came out. What was the impetus that caused this to happen? Because I can definitely tell you I was extremely jealous when you did this, because I'm like, it's just way too good. I'm never gonna be able to do something that good.
Yeah. So Dave, I was introduced to Dave. He works at the web department at West Virginia University, and I was introduced to him because he gave a really phenomenal talk at a time where still only a handful of people were really talking intelligently about mobile web stuff. And how to do it right. And he basically was sharing some of his experiences at West Virginia University. And so, yeah, we got to know each other. And, but yeah, so this general idea of Pattern Lab came to be whenever I was sort of on my way out at RGA and about to start working on my own. And the first project I got brought on board with was redesign of TechCrunch, the technology blog. Mm-hmm. And so I had this idea in my head, and I'd seen things like Jeremy Keith's pattern primer and stuff, where it's basically, you write these sort of patterns in their own little HTML file, and then basically you have one index file that just loops over those and sucks them all in and generates a style guide. So I sort of started with that general idea as a starting point, and ended up, sort of building this whole thing out: atoms, molecules, organisms, in pages. Actually, there were only 4 steps at the time, but yeah, so that's all it was really just sort of nested PHP includes, and it worked. But I am no programmer, and Dave is, and so basically I asked him if he'd be interested in sort of coming on to help me with it, and he took the thing, and in about 2 days he's just like, I rebuilt it from the ground up, and it's not shitty anymore. And really, so since then it's just been about 1.5 years now of Dave just taking it into the stratosphere and turning it from this sort of really fiddly idea I had and into real working software that people, and I travel all around the world and see people using it to great success. And it is, kudos to Dave. Yeah. Hats off to Dave.
That's really awesome. Yeah, we actually had a user question, or a listener question. User, sorry. User. Specifically about atoms, molecules, organisms. For when did that concept started coming together? Was that similar time as Pattern Lab, or was that was that predated a bit?
Yeah. So what atomic design is now is basically there's 5 distinct layers of, for lack of a better word, I don't want to call them steps because it's not a linear thing, but basically atomic design is a series of sort of 5 layers: atoms, molecules, organisms, templates, and pages. And basically the reason why I chose that analogy and sort of kept coming back to it is because, with a lot of whatever the style guides that were released and pattern libraries that were released out into the wild, and even sort of tools like Bootstrap, I love them conceptually, but at the same time it's just like this sort of ad hoc group of modules. It was sort of loosely categorized, sort of loosely organized, and I sort of thought that it could have gone further, and so that's sort of what led me to start thinking about sort of establishing this methodology where basically it's a very deliberate way to construct an interface design system where you have these atoms, these elements, right? These things that are totally blown apart, the elemental aspects of your interface, right? So abstract things like obviously color swatches, font stacks, even invisible things like animation defaults, right? Fades and stuff like that. That stuff should be consistent across your entire experience. But then, of course, HTML tags, right? A button, an input, a label. Those are these sort of, they can't be broken down any further without, ceasing to exist in their sort of
blowing up the
states.
entire universe.
Right, exactly.
Cats and dogs living together, those kind of
things. But yeah, so and then you sort of start taking these atoms and combining them into organisms, these sort of relatively simple components, right? So a search form molecule might be comprised of a label that says search, right? Search the site, and then an input where you enter your keyword or whatever, and then a button to submit the thing. That's a relatively simple component, right? And it's it's the standalone. It's very single responsibility principle, like sort of reinforcing a lot of that, bringing it into interface design. And then those sort of relatively simple components can be put into more complex components, something like a header, and that's what I call organisms. So the header organism might be comprised of the logo, primary navigation, search form, login, or whatever's in there. But it's still a subsection of a page, right? It's still a module, but it's relatively complex. And so that's essentially all it is. It's just like these sort of nested includes. And that gives you a vocabulary, it gives you structure and sort of how to architect your sort of interface. And then sort of now you have these relatively complex components, and now you can sort of stitch those together into something that resembles a real working, fully complete web page. But there's sort of, I drew a distinction, and this is interesting, you're asking about the history behind it. During the TechCrunch project, there was only pages. There was no templates. And we sort of ran into issues with that really quickly, because what they wanted to see as a client, they wanted to see what their blog post, what their article template would look like whenever there's a YouTube video embedded in it, or whenever there's a press release embedded within it, or whenever there's a bunch of block quotes, or sort of, all these variants of what's essentially the same template. And so that's what sort of we learned and sort of applied that to another project for Entertainment Weekly, sort of brought in this extra layer for templates. So we basically had like an article template, and then this page layer that sort of is a specific instance of that template. And the way that Pattern Lab is architected, the way that Pattern Lab works is that you're able to essentially just swap out some JSON stuff. You could sort of switch things on or off, or conditionally include or exclude certain sections and stuff. And so what it does is it keeps just everything super dry, so that you can make a change at an atomic, molecular, organism, template level, and all of those changes will propagate throughout, like wherever they're included. And if you find whenever you get to that page level that the YouTube video fundamentally busts the template or something, you could go back and sort of solve that at a more atomic level.
Very nice.
So
yeah. So the question that came into that brought up this whole dive back into the past is a great segue to it. Is so when you're talking atoms and molecules and organisms, are there challenges when you have multiple people and everyone looks at this thing, and one person says, "Oh, that's totally a molecule," and someone else says, "Oh, no, that's totally an organism," or someone says, "Oh, that's an atom," or something like that. How often do those arguments come up? Do you have guidelines that you typically follow to get those solved?
Yeah, it is a really great question, and it is something that comes up quite a bit, actually, especially whenever you're working with a team whenever you have people with different opinions, and boy, I've seen it all. People emailing me, applying sort of what I've established, sort of, we'll say incorrectly. But again, it's sort of the beauty of it is, as a concept, I think it's nice. But whenever you help develop a concept, you should be prepared for whenever people sort of take that and butcher it or whatever. But no, but there are lots of instances where something could be either a molecule or an organism. So for example, a molecule, I would probably, well, the example I just gave, a search form molecule, that's a fully complete form tag, right, with functioning stuff within it. And let's say you're using Twitter's type ahead, or let's say there's an advanced search option and all sorts of other stuff. It's like, well, now all of a sudden it's no longer just a simple form. There's like a lot of stuff going on in it. So maybe you would elevate that into the role of an organism. And it's also sort of not cut and dry. Sometimes you might have, we'll say, a contact form that is really cut and dry, but consists of multiple form elements and stuff. Like I've put that in the molecule level, even though the things making it up, a label, an input, you might call that a molecule as well. So it's okay to have a little gray. It's okay to have a little discussion. General rule of thumb is, is this a relatively simple piece of interface, or could this be deconstructed further into 2 or more modules? And if that answer is yes, then I would say that's an organism.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a rule of thumb that I follow, is typically if it's lots of molecules, it's probably an organism. If you're gonna, if you can, it shouldn't be another molecule. If you have 2 molecules together, then that should go up a level. But I mean, that's not always 100%. But it makes the most sense to me anyway.
Yeah, I think that is. I wouldn't lose sleep over it. But just as long as the team that's working together all generally is speaking the same language, and again, those sort of rules of thumb of definitely, like when it comes to like atoms and stuff, though, I would say that that's more of a concrete line. It's basically like, is this an HTML element, or is this made up of of other stuff? But again, it is just sort of an arbitrary way of naming things, and so if the rules get bent a little bit, that's okay. Just don't kill each other over it.
Brad's gonna chase you down and make you change your molecules. So awesome. Well, we're wrapping up on time a little bit, but I wanted to get a chance to ask you what's next. Like, where is this going? Are we going to have a 6th category eventually? Do you have other big plans for it, or is there just some good steam behind it? You want to see where it goes?
Yeah, as a methodology, I'd say that atomic design is pretty rock solid. So since those first couple projects, we've worked on a few other ones. A redesign of Time Inc. That we worked on last year, and that was really my first time using what Dave had turned Pattern Lab into as like real working software, and so that was tremendously exciting to see it really all come to life in a real way. And so did that and a few other different projects, but then also again starting to see more and more people in other organizations, people building airlines websites with it and stuff like that, and even folks like Twitter. I don't know if they're using it in its entirety or whatever, but they're calling things different. That's sort of the beauty of the methodology, is that the names are sort of arbitrary, as long as you have like some sort of system in place, and they're calling them elements and blocks and something else. I don't know. But so as a methodology, I'd say that it's sound. From a Pattern Lab standpoint, from the actual tool standpoint, this is where I'm really excited. So Dave's been sort of hard at work, and I feel so bad for him just because he's doing all of this like in his free time, and he has a family, he has a full-time job, he has all this stuff, and a lot of people are like, hey, where is the next version? Where's the next version? But so he's really working hard on it, and he's doing a great job. And basically, what he's doing is he's really breaking everything apart and making the entire system modular. So if you wanted to use a particular templating engine, so let's say, like sort of by default, the old version is mustache driven. But let's say you didn't want to use mustache, you want to use handlebars, or you want to use blade, or you wanted to use some other twig, or I don't even know some of these things. It was made up to me. But you could sort of, drop in your own templating language and sort of, have Pattern Lab work on that. And the front end is all sort of separate and stuff, and there's actually a node port of it. And so basically the idea is to sort of, break everything down into sort of more modular bits so that people, whether they're using the Node version or wanting to, swap out different tools or whatever, would be able to make use of it. So in the end goal of all of that, the reason why Dave's doing the effort, putting forth this effort to make that happen, is that we're really trying to pursue the holy grail, where you're able to plug this thing into whatever your back-end environment is, your sort of CMS, and have those things sort of living side by side, and basically you make a change to the style guide, it makes a change to the production, sort of vice versa, right? This bridge is established between them. And right now it's sort of self-contained or whatever, but people are starting to find ways to sort of marry those two. So I'm really, really excited about that, to try to, I've seen like very specific instances of people doing that, keeping their style guide and production environment in sync, but it's very, it's very custom made, obviously. And it's like, they build this system from the ground up. They've sort of built this, The Lonely Planet, Ian Feather wrote about it. They basically wrote a style guide, wrote an API for the style guide, and the production environment basically eats that API. And it's super smart stuff. And basically what we're trying to do is figure out how to get all that thinking into Pattern Lab itself, so that whether you're a Drupal developer, a WordPress developer, some crazy Ruby shop or whatever, you're able to sort of make use of Pattern Lab to make it do what you want.
Nice. Lisa, do you have something you were going to say?
Oh yeah, no, I just wanted to jump in because we're trying to kind of do a similar thing, have kind of consumable ingredients, and have production actually pull those from a style guide place, and have the kind of the container of the style guide separate from the actual, we're calling them ingredients, but atoms, molecules, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And have to use that. And so I'm super excited about the language agnostic Pattern Lab, I guess.
Yeah.
Kind of seeing where that goes. It's something I'm super excited to hear that's coming. It's right up my alley.
Yeah, and there's still gonna there's still gonna need to be some work done, right? Whoever is implementing it, and that's sort of one of the big things that I have to remind people of time and again is whenever people are like, I don't really understand what this thing is, this is, why would I use this over Bootstrap? And it's like, well, no, like you still need to do the work. Like, and a lot of people are like, oh, that sounds.
No, what? No.
and that's going to be the case with sort of integration with the production environment. Obviously, it's impossible for us to sort of see every nuance and how things are architected there, but we're getting closer there, I guess.
Yeah, and I would go so far as to say that if you tried to make it a system that could integrate with production, ultimately you would have fewer people that would be able to use it, because every project's different, every setup is different, and so ultimately people are going to then struggle to get it set up in their environment. So I really like that you have this methodology and this kind of framework is not the right word, but structure, right?
Totally. Yeah.
Apply your own designs and your own setup around it, and I think that's really part of why that's been so successful for y'all.
Yeah, and that's been a big thing for me, is sort of going back to my RGA days. in order to make some really minor markup changes, I would need to have the sysadmins, like the networking people, install a certain version of Visual Studio on my computer and like download all these plugins and like do all this stuff. And this is just like to change, a freaking line of CSS or something. And so that's been a mission, for Pattern Lab right from the get-go. Like, I am not a competent developer. I'm not like a just npm install. Like, it's like that's a lot of that. Like, I take offense to it a lot of times just because a lot of people presume that that you have this prerequisite knowledge, and so that's been very much a principle of the project. Is it's like it needs to be easy enough for Brad to use, and hopefully that means it's easy enough for other people to use. And what's important about that, again, sort of back to sort of integrating this into a back-end environment and production environment, is that we're trying to sort of lower that barrier to entry so that front-end people and designers who are comfortable with like a little bit of code and stuff can contribute to that stuff, and then eventually sort of have that woven into the production environment without having to do the whole Java setup and what have you. So you don't need a whole dev environment to make changes to markup.
That's awesome.
That's it. And also to test and to view and to, I know for us as a Drupal shop, we've got kind of a similar setup. We have a style guide where we can do all of our work in that style guide and like never ever ever touch Drupal. Like, I haven't fired up MAMP in like weeks, and it's wonderful because like the amount of time of syncing databases and pulling down this and like setting up this, and it's ridiculous amount of time you can spend trying to get a local environment set up.
Yeah.
Versus the time you spend npm install grunt.
Yeah, and what's also really nice about this, I found this in my own client work, is to have a sort of a front end, a production ready front end environment that's devoid of any CMS. You're able to have something to compare that production environment to. So once you actually roll it in and now all of a sudden things are taking 7 seconds to load, it's like, well, okay, so if we just look at the front end, it's like you're sort of washing your hands of the matter. You're like, look, I'm doing my job as a front end person. We're making this is loading like lightning quick over here. It must be something with the back end. So to sort of have that sort of back and forth, that sort of that sort of statically built sort of front end is great. And again, like, it's statically built, but it's still really dynamic in that sense. And so that's why I'm hopeful that it'll be easy to sort of bridge those two together and still sort of get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, and in a way, it's its own lightweight CMS. Like we're actually using Swig, which is a templating engine, to kind of do a lot of what Pattern Lab does. So in a way, we kind of have our own CMS with our own data structures, ingesting these templates and CSS to make these things, and pretty much in the same way that the Drupal does, just a lot more lightweight and a lot easier to build and to set up. So I certainly see that as a huge boon going forward as more people start using these tools. The speed at which they can develop and the speed at which they can build new things, or just go in like first day on the job, I need to change the styles of a header one. Like, what's the steps to do that? Like, if it's Pattern Lab, it's like, pull the repo, run a command, and start making changes. If it's crazy big Java backend CMS and keys and all sorts of stuff and databases, and like 2 weeks later, okay, now you can actually contribute code. And that's no lie whatsoever.
I don't know what this does, so I'm just gonna leave it alone, and then all of the code load and all this stuff. It's a really nasty spiral. So it's awesome to have that kind of flexibility for sure.
So awesome, Brad. I definitely appreciate it. It's really exciting to see where Pattern Lab's going to be going, and kind of see some of those integration points, and to really have something to look forward to. That this isn't the end. There's way more in store, and I know personally I'm looking forward to. I don't want to be on a project ever again in the future that's not using some type of style guide, and I know Pattern Lab is definitely one of the best ones out there. So thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for talking front-end architecture, for talking style guides. Greatest luck on the book. I'm definitely going to check out those podcasts. I think you just did one with Gina, is that right?
Yep, Gina Bolton, and we got a bunch of other really smart people coming up too. So it's pretty awesome.
It's very, very cool. So I will definitely be checking those out. I hope everyone else does as well. So next week, we don't have anyone scheduled yet. We have a few people in mind, so we'll be coming down and trying to find you. But I know we've got some awesome guest speakers the next couple weeks with Jonathan Snook is going to be here in a few weeks. I think he's 2 weeks. And then 2 weeks after that, Ben Frayne. I'm really excited about talking to Ben Frayne. That guy just keeps blowing my mind. Like, we're just on the same wavelength. It's just like crazy. He's just a couple steps ahead of me, which is great because I don't have to figure it out. He's already done it. So some great stuff in the future. I hope you stick around for that. Again, Brad, you're awesome. Keep it up. Hopefully we can run into each other. I definitely owe you a beer after you sitting down and taking time to talk to us.
Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. It was great talking.
Thank you.
Cool. All right. See you guys, and we'll catch you next week.